France 3, Senegal 1, a result that announces Les Bleus have arrived at this World Cup with authority. Welcome to FairPlay, Football AI Review. Its opening round delivered. France needed a statement performance to establish themselves at the top of the group, while Senegal, Africa's most anticipated qualifier, needed points immediately to avoid an early hole. Norway had already beaten Iraq 4-1 earlier in the day, meaning both sides knew exactly what the stakes were before a single pass was played. The narrative threads heading into this one were rich. France, under Didier Deschamps, had been in imperious Nations League qualifying form, 7 wins from their last 9 competitive outings. Senegal, under Pape Thiaw, had swept through African qualifying, winning 5 of their last 6, and arrived in New Jersey backed by a passionate traveling support that made MetLife Stadium feel like a West African cauldron. This was a genuine heavyweight collision between 2 of the world's top 15 nations. Deschamps set France up in a 4-2-3-1, a shape built around control and vertical penetration. Aurélien Tchouaméni anchored the double pivot alongside Adrien Rabiot, providing the platform for the attacking 3 behind Mbappé to rotate freely. The key intent was to use the width of Jules Koundé on the right and Theo Hernandez on the left to stretch Senegal's defensive block and create the central pockets that Michael Olise and Désiré Doué could exploit. Pape Thiaw mirrored Deschamps almost exactly, also deploying a 4-2-3-1. The logic was clear. Match France's structure to limit the space between the lines, use Idrissa Gueye and Pape Gueye in the double pivot to disrupt France's build-up, and rely on Ismaïla Sarr's pace-wide and Sadio Mané's movement to threaten on the counter. It was a pragmatic, defensively disciplined setup from a coach who knew his side couldn't afford to be reckless. The structural battle was compelling from the first whistle. Both teams mirroring each other meant the key mismatch emerged not in shape but in individual quality. Olise against El Hadji Malick Diouf on the right flank became the defining corridor. Olise's ability to drift inside and link with Koundé overloaded that channel repeatedly. Senegal's double pivot also struggled to press high enough to prevent France from recycling through Tchouaméni and building momentum. France controlled the early exchanges with composure rather than urgency. Tchouaméni completed 69 passes and was the metronome that kept France ticking without ever rushing. Possession sat at 53% for the hosts, but the more telling early statistic was that France launched more dangerous attacks, 32 to Senegal's 27, suggesting they were always probing with purpose rather than simply hoarding the ball. Edouard Mendy was the busiest man on the pitch in the opening 45 minutes, making 5 saves across the full match to keep his side in contention at halftime. Nicolas Jackson went closest for Senegal before the break, his effort rattling the woodwork in what would be the Lions' best opportunity of the half. Ismaïla Sarr fired off 3 shots, 2 off target, as Senegal showed they were not simply sitting back and absorbing. The first half ended goalless, which felt like a slight injustice to France given the territorial advantage they had built. But it also reflected Senegal's organization, Koulibaly commanding his back 4 with authority, Niakate sweeping intelligently beside him, and the double pivot working hard to make France work for every entry into the final third. At halftime, the question was whether Deschamps would shift anything or simply trust that the quality in his side would eventually tell. France came out sharper after the interval, and the pressure became increasingly relentless. Olise was growing into the game at an alarming rate, and it was his invention on the right that would eventually crack the deadlock. The 66th minute arrived like a thunderclap. Koundé and Olise exchanged passes twice on the right channel in quick, incisive combination before Olise threaded a perfectly weighted diagonal pass through the Senegalese defensive line. Mbappé had already made his run, bursting past Koulibaly with the timing that only elite forwards possess. And with the ball arriving at his feet just outside the 6-yard box, he composed himself and slid a right-foot finish inside Mendy's far post. 1-0 France, and the 66,000-plus inside MetLife Stadium erupted. Deschamps made his first change in the 80th minute, withdrawing Ousmane Dembélé and introducing Bradley Barcola. It was a fresh pair of legs down the left channel, a direct runner to exploit tiring Senegalese fullbacks, and it paid dividends within 2 minutes in the most dramatic fashion. Barcola had been on the pitch for just over 2 minutes when Rabiot played him through with a precise through ball in behind Senegal's defensive line. The Paris Saint-Germain winger took one touch to set himself and then clipped the ball beautifully over the onrushing Mendy and into the net, his 4th international goal, scored on his World Cup debut in 131 seconds. 2-0 France, and the match looked sealed. Senegal's management had already made bold moves before the second goal arrived. At 75 minutes, Ibrahim Mbaye replaced the increasingly ineffective Ismaïla Sarr, while Habib Diarra came on for Lamine Camara 1 minute later. Then, at 83 minutes, a double change, Iliman Ndiaye for Pape Gueye and Bamba Dieng for Nicolas Jackson, gave Senegal an entirely different attacking look in the final stages. The double substitution at 83 minutes altered the game's texture completely. Ndiaye's creativity and directness introduced an unpredictability that France had not faced, and it was his contribution that would prove decisive for Senegal's consolation. Dieng added an aggressive pressing element up front that gave France's back 4 less time on the ball in those final minutes. Then came the extraordinary final minutes. Deep into added time, Iliman Ndiaye slid Ibrahim Mbaye into a one-on-one, the teenager flying past Theo Hernandez before the ball struck Maignan, who could only palm it into his own net. 2-1, and a moment of genuine history. At just 18 years and 143 days old, Mbaye became the youngest African goalscorer in World Cup history. France's response was emphatic, and it came immediately. Within 60 seconds, Olise drove through the heart of Senegal's tired midfield, and the ball eventually found its way to Mbappé 30 yards from goal. There was no hesitation. The France captain unleashed a right-foot strike that screamed into the top corner with a ferocity that left Mendy rooted. 3-1, and the match was over in the most dramatic fashion imaginable. The final change worth noting from the French perspective was Rayan Cherki coming on for Désiré Doué in the 87th minute. Cherki played only 3 minutes and barely had time to influence proceedings, but it signaled Deschamps managing his young attackers' minutes ahead of a busy schedule rather than anything tactical. At 88 minutes, Pathé Ciss replaced Idrissa Gueye for Senegal, the veteran midfielder having given his all but visibly running on empty. Ciss barely had time to settle, but his arrival summed up the exhaustive rotations Pape Thiaw made in the closing stages as he tried desperately to find a spark. The decisive moment of this match was unquestionably Mbappé's opening goal in the 66th minute. For 65 minutes, Senegal had defended with structure and discipline, frustrating France's attacking intent. The moment that organization crumbled, the moment Mbappé burst past Koulibaly and found the net, the psychological grip Senegal had maintained evaporated. Every subsequent goal flowed from that single moment of individual brilliance. France's 53% possession came with real purpose, 575 total passes at 88% accuracy compared to Senegal's 502 at 86%. The passing stats were relatively even, but the quality of France's entries into dangerous zones was far superior. 32 dangerous attacks to 27 tells only part of the story. The locations and timing of those attacks were far more threatening. 11 shots for France against 6 for Senegal, with 8 on target compared to just 2. That differential is stark and honest. France's expected goals of 1.2 against Senegal's 0.61 suggests the scoreline was slightly flattering to France, though Mbappé's last-minute thunderbolt from 30 yards was emphatically not a high-probability chance. Mendy's 5 saves were genuinely outstanding and kept this match competitive far longer than the underlying numbers suggest it should have been. Defensively, France were disciplined and rarely troubled until the extraordinary sequence of events in stoppage time. Upamecano made 6 tackles, and Saliba was composed and authoritative alongside him. Conceding from that specific sequence, Ndiaye's brilliance and a goalkeeper error, was an aberration rather than a structural failing. Maignan's 2 saves across the 90 minutes suggest France were fundamentally solid. Michael Olise was the standout player on the pitch for France, and perhaps across the entire opening round of fixtures. 2 assists, both for Mbappé's goals, 57 passes completed, 2 shots on target, 2 key attacking moments that entirely changed the match's trajectory. His ability to combine with Koundé on the right and then produce decisive final passes was the difference between the two teams at the highest level of analysis. For Senegal, Edouard Mendy was exceptional in defeat. 5 saves, many of them at crucial moments in the first half and early second half, gave his side the platform to believe they could get something from the game. Without his performance, France could have been 3 or 4-0 ahead long before the 66th minute. He deserves enormous credit in a match his side ultimately lost. Kylian Mbappé, for all his 2 goals and individual brilliance, was the player who most divided opinion on the night. Only 4 shots, 16 passes, 2 fouls committed. For the world's best striker captaining France at a home World Cup, the expectation is domination across 90 minutes, not 2 moments of genius. He was peripheral for long stretches, which will concern Deschamps ahead of the tougher matches to come. Tactically, Deschamps got the major decisions right. Trusting Olise in a free role behind Mbappé was the call that unlocked the match, and the Barcola substitution at 80 minutes was perfectly timed. Fresh legs introduced at precisely the moment Senegal were most vulnerable. Papa Thiaw's defensive setup was admirably brave, but the decision to wait until the 75th minute to make changes meant Senegal's best attacking opportunities came too late against a team of France's quality. The head-to-head history between these nations is limited at World Cup level, but the broader pattern confirms France's superiority in top-level competition against African opposition. This result reinforces that narrative, though Senegal's late goal and the spirit they showed in those final minutes suggests Thiaw's side will not roll over against Norway and Iraq. France arrive at this World Cup in the finest form Deschamps' side has shown in years. 5 wins from their last 7 competitive outings, with the 4-0 demolition of Ukraine in Nations League qualifying standing as a benchmark of their attacking potential. This squad is deeper and more balanced than the side that reached the World Cup final in Qatar 4 years ago, and tonight, that depth showed in the Barcola substitution alone. Senegal had been in excellent form heading into this tournament. 5 wins from 6, including a 5-0 thrashing of South Sudan and a 3-2 away win in the DR Congo. But those are African qualifying opponents. The step up to France at a World Cup is an entirely different test, and the gulf in individual quality in the final third ultimately proved decisive. They will need to find significantly more attacking cohesion against Norway. After matchday 1, Norway lead Group 1 with 3 points on goal difference over France. Both have played both won convincingly. Senegal and Iraq both sit on 0. France are firmly on track for qualification. A win against Iraq on June 22nd would likely confirm their place in the last 16. Senegal face the hardest possible task next, Norway away, and need a result urgently. France face Iraq on June 22nd and then Norway on June 26th. On paper, Iraq are the most vulnerable side in the group, and France should have enough to take maximum points there. The Norway fixture could define who tops Group 1, with Holland's side having already shown serious intent. Senegal face Norway on June 23rd before hosting Iraq on June 26th. They need at least 4 points from those 2 games to have any realistic qualification hope. My prediction is clear. France qualify as group winners if they beat Iraq, and nothing about tonight suggests they won't. Senegal's path is narrow but not closed. A draw against Norway combined with a win over Iraq could get them to 4 points, which may be enough for a third-place berth depending on other groups. But they cannot afford another goalless performance for 66 minutes against a team of Norway's attacking quality. France 3, Senegal 1 is a result that flatters neither side entirely. Senegal defended with real courage for over an hour, and their consolation came from a moment of genuine teenage brilliance. But the gulf in clinical quality, embodied in the Olise-Mbappé combination and the Barcola cameo, told the real story of this match. Group 1 is France's to lose from here. Thank you for being part of this analysis on FairPlay Football AI Review. France versus Norway on June 26th could be the match that defines this entire group. Two of Europe's genuine contenders, unbeaten, ambitious, and with points to play for. You will not want to miss it. That's the FairPlay verdict on this one. If you want more analysis like this, follow us. Find us on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok at FairPlay AI, and follow Anthony personally on X at Anthony FairPlay. See you next match.